Nice.
What's going on, everyone? We are live.
Context is everything.
That's right. We were just talking about Dan's lighting over there. But his lighting looks good. His audio is good. So I think we're all set to rock and roll. How have you been, man?
Good. Yeah, really good, man. Just busy. Been heads down for a while, just grinding away, making sure we got this stuff to market in time. The testing, development stuff, that was done a while ago, but just getting the final touches and getting product the way we want it to be and everything to market is the hardest part. So, yeah.
Well, you were on Travis's live stream last night, right?
Yeah.
Talking about some of the stuff, and you guys were up pretty late. But how long would you say it takes you from concept to like an actual product? Not necessarily finished product, but like you want to come out with a new bait, you have an idea for what you want to do. Like how long does that basic like start of the process take?
It's funny you ask. So I see Jeff Penner is in your comments.
Yeah.
He's always talking to me, and he asked me that exact question today. He's like, how long do things take? And I sent him a screenshot of a first fish that we ever caught on the Dropkick shad, and that was I think it was September 20th, 2023. So
wow.
Yeah, so that was like kind of the first like prototype that we felt comfortable with, and then we tested that again for a full year. So we developed that all summer. That was like the bait that was like kind of like our final version without eyes on it, and then they went to work. So it takes a long time. There he is. There you can confirm. And that's the thing I think that separates like us from everyone else is like we don't skimp on the testing, because so many times in that full year, like we pretty much say like we're going to dedicate a full season from spring to the end of the season on testing the bait, because we find things in the testing phase that we didn't think about in the development. I think most brands don't do that, and then they come to market like, oh shoot, that's a flaw. Oh, we could have done this better. And just it allows us to really make those final little micro detail touches to the bait that really elevate it a lot. So like the Dropkick shad, for example, that was like there was a few little things we tweaked kind of again near the end. There were big adjustments that I thought made a big difference. One being the eyes. Like we released a video. We initially went with kind of like goofier eyes. I was like, oh, those are good. And then we had an opportunity to get, I mean, they were more expensive, but they were like lifelike 3D eyes. And that's what's in the final product. And I think that just turned out so much better. So I'm glad we didn't rush the market in that first season.
Well, and talking about the Dropkick, I have one right here to show, or you probably have a bunch, but what you're talking about are going out. First of all, you take it out of the package, and one of the things that like Great Lakes Finesse, a lot of your products come with a plastic insert, essentially. Like it's basically just like an L-shaped plastic insert to keep the baits from deforming. Yep. Mm-hmm. One thing that was pretty cool is that this actually comes in a clamshell. Yep. So like you don't have to worry about really these getting deformed at all, which is such a big problem. Like I really love to fish a easy shiner. Yeah, I loved an easy shiner, but half the pack is like kinked after the first 2 or 3 trips.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like the swim bait is so critical that material is straight and perfect for that bait to swim right, especially at really slow speeds. So that was like the biggest thing with this bait was it needed, because it was intended to really fish on a drop shot and then also like slowly reeled in, that tail had to like kick perfectly side to side. And if it wasn't straight, it just wouldn't work. You'd have to swim it way faster than we want to.
Well, so like there are the lifelike eyes that you're talking about. It's kind of hard to see here. But
yeah.
Instead of like
see it, maybe they're hard to see. Like when you go and you see like on like LureNet or one of our retailer sites, you'll see.
Yeah, they have a lot better pictures.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like it's not just like a white eye or like a yellow eye, which is pretty cool. It's a pretty neat little touch that just makes it look a little bit more realistic.
Yeah. So yeah, the Dropkick shad seems to be really exciting for a lot of people. Very crowded category, but we identified some major flaws with stuff that we like to fish, but they weren't quite dialed in. The biggest thing that everyone can relate to is durability. So like the best swim baits out there, these little micro ones. Like the biggest thing that I saw was we'd be reeling, our bait, and then we'd get a hit, we'd set the hook, miss, and you don't have a second opportunity at that fish for a follow-up bite because the bait has fallen down the shank, or it's torn, or you catch a fish, they're schooled up around you, and you got to reach for a new bait. So durability, number one, I thought, okay, that's an easy one to solve. But then on the drop shot, because we drop shotting a swim bait is a big deal. They all sink and they all float, so they don't perform well when you're not moving them. And I wanted one that I could roll out, sort of drag it on the drop shot up to a boulder, and then let it sit and let that fish come out from the boulder and get it. That's just one example of what I'd be looking to do. So yeah, that true neutral buoyancy, and then the matte finish, which none of the other little swim baits have. So those are, it doesn't seem like much. I mean, those details for most people probably don't mean a whole lot, but if you're a hardcore angler, it's, I hate using the word game changer, so I'm not, but it's a big deal.
Yeah,
it's a big deal.
One of the cool things too is, and this is just a tiny detail that I like, are these little slots at the top.
Yep.
You can just barely see it, but they're like little indentations at the top. And
yep.
There's a lot of baits. If you don't have a little swim bait rigged perfectly straight, it's just not going to swim right. And if you figure out, okay, it needs to be in between the second and third hole on the top, well, every time you rig that bait, now you can rig it perfectly every single time. So to me, that's a really big thing.
The other thing that people probably don't notice is right under the nose, there's a little circle there.
Yep.
That's intended for a drop shot hook. So that's where we push the hook through.
Oh,
so so kind of like little hook guides. When you get familiar with the bait, you start to see these little things, and you're like, oh, that's a cool touch that I didn't know I needed until I needed it. So
how'd you come up with the action, or what were you looking for in the action? Because it's in between. You have your Kitech that wants to kick really big, and then you have your easy shiner that wants to kick really, really tight.
Yeah.
But this almost has an oscillation, the tail almost rolls, but it doesn't necessarily kick crazy wide from what I've seen in the underwater footage.
Yeah, there was three that we use and like. So the Kitech, the Easy Shiner, and also the Haze Dong. And we were looking for a kick that was kind of right in between the Kitech and the Haze Dong. We were looking for that right in the middle, just because we felt like at times the Haze Dong didn't quite have a kick for us, in addition to other problems, not to knock the bait, because it's a great bait. They're just things.
It's awesome on a drop.
It's an incredible bait. There's no doubt a Haze Dong is a really great bait as well. But as soon as you thread that bait onto a ball head or something, you blow the eyes out. The whole face gets messed up. There's little things that I felt like if I was building my perfect swim bait, which that was the intention, was let's build our dream swim bait that we want, and then we'll sell it. If people want to buy it, they can buy it. And that's kind of this is what we came up with, was I feel like if a Haze Dong had a baby with a Kitech, this would be the result, right in between, in terms of body width, the action. This would be the baby of those two combined if they merged.
Well, that's one of the funny things too, and hearing you say it is funny because we've talked about it in the last live stream, but you guys don't build baits necessarily to go out and sell a bajillion baits. It's because you guys want to build the perfect swim bait for your setup, right? You guys want to build the perfect bait for the applications that you guys see it, and so you guys refine inside the niche you already know, right?
Yep.
I think that's really interesting, instead of just trying to go out and we need to make a swim bait because that's the next product we need to make in the lineup. Maybe that happens, but a lot of it's driven by what your needs are.
Honestly, if I didn't feel like we were truly solving a problem, the last thing I wanted to get into was the most competitive category in the finesse game, which is a small swim bait. There's a billion of them, right? So that's not generally what we like to do. We like to kind of stay in our own lane and find niches or categories that haven't been served. This one, it's almost like people felt served by them, until they realized, wait a minute, there were problems. And I think everyone can identify, especially with the durability problem, on a quality swim bait. And that's just, for me, the easiest thing for people to relate to when they're like, oh yeah, there was a problem there. That was annoying.
So what was your biggest key to make a swim bait that has action and does what you want but doesn't fall apart? Right? Like, is some of that in the way you build the bait? Is it in just the plastic you use? Is it like, how do you get the action and not compromise durability?
The material is, oh man, without giving up all the secrets, the durability in the material we use allows us to do things that other brands can't do. The biggest example of that is in the new Ned Bug, which we'll talk about in a bit. But like, the appendages on this new bait are so thin that pretty much any of the other brands couldn't get away with that, because it would just fall apart. Like a panfish would just start playing with those and pull them off, and they just can't. So because we've figured this material thing out where we still have action but durability, it just allows us, and not like that elastomer material that like is extremely annoying. I hate fishing that stuff for many reasons, but we just figured out something that no one else had really thought about. And again, I think that comes down to our focus on the underwater more so than what the bait looks like on the shelf. Not to like not in the industry, but when you're focused on those things, you realize you need to make changes. But if you're not focused on that, then you don't realize you have a problem.
Well, it's funny because like when you were talking about the Ned Bug, I was just pulling one out of the pack and I just grabbed it by these little pinchers and I just, or whatever you want to call them, little antenna, and pulled them out of the pack. And these are very small, like these are extremely small little antenna, but it's pretty interesting to see the durability of these.
Yeah, and I think a really good example of that is in like the juvie craw, when we have these little tiny hair like appendages. Like, I remember when we launched this bait, everyone's like, yeah, right, everything, they're just gonna pull those off. And you know, anyone who actually fishes this bait knows that that is not a problem at all. So it's, anyway, to be able to get the action, we're able to do things with the bait that other brands can't, because of the material and the way we formulated it, I should say.
So at what point in making the Dropkick did you know like it was going to be the deal swim bait? Was it when you caught that fish that you just posted the other day, or was it before that, or like at what point were you testing that thing?
So
like, yeah, it's pretty good.
I knew. So not the first few times we went out, because the first few times we went out, we knew that they were going to be banger days, and it, like, to the point where some days like you can throw anything and they're going to eat. The day I knew was when I went out with my friend Steve, and we went out on Lake Ontario, and it was so grindy and tough, and they were not eating anything. And I wasn't going to show him because he wasn't really involved in the like design, but I was like, I want to see if they'll eat this thing. And we had been like around some big fish for a while off a point and then a flat. I'd seen them, they're huge, like 6-pounders. So I backed off the fish and threw the swim bait in there when we had already worked this area for like 2 hours without a sniff, and they were there, and they started eating it. And I was like, holy crap, like that's incredible. And that was when I was like, okay, this is a legit swim bait now. Like, I know for a fact. And then, like I said, we had it, that was the first fall. So like when I sent that picture, like when I took that picture and I sent it to Jeff earlier or whatever, and he's watching, late, like that was later that fall. And then we had it all the summer later. And in our minds, we're fishing tournaments, and there's no question at all that we want to use the Dropkick shad over anything else in a money situation. And that's when I'm like, hey, we got something.
Was it on a drop shot, or was it on a ball head, or like
it was on a ball head? Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I just want to see if we'd catch them swimming, because I mean, that's a really good way of catching them, is just like, this is kind of like just on our stealth ball head there. Yeah. That's like, I mean, that's a killer combo right there. And that was like the first test, and then it was like, okay, let's throw it on the sneaky underspin. We made it fit that thing like perfectly. Super durable. You can, fish that and catch like a pile of fish on one bait. And yeah, I mean, just continued to work. And then the drop shot test was like critical. That was pretty much in the first couple trips. We were like, hey, we got to make sure they'll eat this on a drop shot. And they started smoking it. And we're like, hey, we're good to go. Like, it's fine. Like, we're good. Like, this is a really solid bait. And then, you know, minor tweaks after that. And you got the Dropkick shad that exists today that I feel like we couldn't have done a better job at all on it.
Do you prefer to fish it on a ball head, or do you like to fish it on like the sneaky swimbait head, or does it matter?
The sneaky swimbait head actually wasn't out when we first developed this bait. We've had this in our back pocket for a long time. So initially we were swimming it on the ball head. So what's funny is like when you look at the video that we put out, that was filmed the next like July. So we caught the first one on in September, fished it for a few more months, and then we filmed the promotional video that summer and then fished it for the rest of the year and made some adjustments. And you'll see in that video that like, you know, we're using like the old eyes and it was on a ball head, and we actually only had like 3 colors that we were using during the testing phase. Like we didn't have all the colors. We only had like black, spicy melon, crushed shad. Those were like the 3 colors we knew we'd get bites on. So we're like, let's just prototype with those colors, because you can't make every color when you're, you know, focused on making the bait work. So you just kind of focus in on like your key, I know I'm going to get bite colors.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So kind of moving from there into the Ned Bug. So like for you, the Ned rig category, I mean, you kind of had a flat cat that you could throw on a ball head and fish around similar areas, and you had the juicy Helgramite, and I mean, there were some other baits you could throw in there. Like, what made you guys feel to move into the Ned rig category? Like, especially with the Ned Bug, like it's not. I don't want to say it's not a small bait, but it's bigger than a lot of like baits I would think in the Great Lakes Finesse standpoint.
Yeah. So I haven't actually told this real like true story to anyone. So I'll tell you why I knew this shape was going to work. Many years ago, I figured out that if you take a tube and you rip every tentacle off of it, it catches 5 times the amount of fish as a tube with full tentacles. So I knew that the like profile of like that would catch them. Then this was before the Ned became popular. So we were cleaning up with a tube without, like, if you picture a tube without tentacles, it looks like a Ned, right? Like a straight worm in a sense, like it's like dumb looking. All of a sudden the Ned became popular and everyone was throwing the Ned, and our little tube without tentacles stopped being as productive because everyone was using a Ned. So then we're like, okay, well, let's just switch to the Ned. And then, you know, we knew that profile would work, like, because it was thicker. Like we knew like a little tube size bait was going to be good. And then the Ned started to become ineffective. So we started to cut little baits apart. Like there's a lot of baits on the market where you can actually like trim appendages off and kind of get to something like this. There was another bait that it's not as nice as this, but it was kind of like a rudimentary version of this. And that was really effective. So between myself, Matt, and like a few of the other guys on the team, we were like, hey, let's reimagine what this Ned could look like now that everyone's fishing it. The fish don't seem to be biting it as well. What can we do? And so like, this was the design that we came up with. And immediately, actually, the first version was longer. It was probably another 1/2 inch longer. And we were getting so many bites. Like this was 2 years ago. This was the same summer but we had it earlier than the Dropkick shad. And we were getting so many bites, but the problem was we were losing like 50, 60, like 50% of the fish. 40, 50% of the fish were coming off. And I was like so frustrated. I didn't understand, especially the bigger ones. Like we were losing those fish. And so we kept messing with it. I was changing the size. I was thinking like, oh, maybe we just need a shorter version. Like, I don't know what the problem is. And it didn't matter what we did. We kept losing fish. And then I kind of figured that what was happening was the material was kind of wrapping around, because it's like a bulbous head. It was wrapping around the hook. And the only way we'd get a hook in them is if we skin hooked them with that. So then I kind of just like one day thought about that, and I went in the back of the boat. Matt was actually at the front of the boat fishing, and I started cutting a hole in the ones I had just to create a slit. And essentially what I was trying to do was make this, like, you can see the hook is in there, but I wanted it to be able to break free like that to see if that was the problem. Boom, I did that, and we started landing like every fish. Like, it was night and day. We're like, oh my gosh, like that's what we needed to do. And it seems so simple, but that was the solution. And I was so close to scrapping this bait, and I'm so happy that it worked out, that we figured it out, because I think it could be one of the best baits, if not the best bait in the GLF lineup, in my opinion.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's funny because, like, when you and I were talking on the phone, you had mentioned that you put a hook slot in a Ned rig, and I'm like, man, do you really need a hook slot in a Ned rig? But now, like, hearing your story and seeing the bait and getting your hands on it, like, it is a pretty bulbous bait. Like, at the head of the bait, it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And it's like that little detail is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I guess when you fish a Ned rig, when you fish this, are you fishing like a traditional style Ned rig where you want this to fall like super slow and just barely get on bottom? Or are you like Great Lakes style fishing it where you're fishing it on like a 3/16 and getting it on bottom and like hopping?
Both. Depends on the situation. If I feel like the fish are fired up, I'm like, I want to get down there. That's when I'll go with like the heavier head. So like we got like a 1/4 ounce or like a 3/16 ounce, but then we also have like a little 1/8 ounce. And I find with the 1/8 ounce, with the size of the bait, it seems to fall pretty slow. And we honestly, like, we drag this for the most part kind of like a tube. Like, we'll just kind of drag it along the bottom slowly, hop it like so that we can get it to like kind of lift and sit sometimes. The biggest thing that we learned in that extra year of testing was that it was an unbelievable jig trailer, like unbelievable. And because it has that breakaway feature, you just get all that jig hook, and man, like, it's so good on the back of a jig. I like these little flared things, that like these little tail things that we put on there to basically kind of allow the jig head to blend in with the bait. What it does is it actually flares the skirt really good. Like, so it's not just hanging straight down, it's already flared. So if you watch the videos on our website and stuff, you'll see how flared it is already. It's so good. I'd say half the time we're fishing it as a jig trailer and half the time we're fishing it straight.
Oh, that's sweet. I didn't really think about that, as putting it on the back of like a little football jig or a ball head jig trailer.
Do yourself a favor and do it.
Yeah, I'm going to. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
And then you guys also came out with some cool colors. Like, for me, the brown green pumpkin special is pretty cool. Like, to have that in this profile is really nice, because where I see myself fishing this is like around those craw hatches, like those craw molts or whatever you want to call them. Like, to me, that's where I pick up a Ned rig a ton, is like when I know those craws are molting, and then like I'll fish a tube most of the other time. Yep. Now talk to me. You mentioned it a little bit, but this Ned Head, right? So for you, the Ned Head, like, you obviously built it to come out with the Ned Bug, but talk to me a little bit about the design on this thing.
Yeah, I mean, we've fished Ned Heads before, and in typical GLF fashion, we just had to go, okay, like, if we were gonna do this and we wanted to build the best one possible, like, what could we do to make it a lot better? And so the biggest, most obvious thing, I mean, the first thing is it's built on a Gamakatsu 604, which is a really good hook. It's hard to get a good Ned Head on a good quality hook. But if you look closely at the back, this is something that most people probably would never even notice, but the back of the head is it's kind of rounded there. You kind of see that.
Yeah.
So we eliminated that hard edge, so that way the bait could lift past that a little bit easier. And then we also, like, you'll notice on the back of it, let me see if you can see that. It's hard to see, but we actually eliminated lead on the top and the bottom of that one side.
Yeah, I see that.
To make the weight go to the other side of the head to also help with lift. So essentially, like, two little minor adjustments in the design of the head make it lift easier and get past that lip. So like a lot of times you need to like hop the bait to get it to like to sit straight. This one gets past that. Like if there's any floating in your material, it's going to lift past it really easily.
That's sweet.
So yeah, little things like that. You know, also when you compare, here, let me show the ball head here.
Also, what do you think is the right size? Like if you were going to fish a certain size shank hook, is it the 1/0?
The 1/0. The 1/0. Yep. Yep. For sure. The one's good for smaller baits and stuff, but I would say for the Ned Head, we're throwing the 1/0 most of the time. So so like here's our stealth ball head. It's got a double keeper, more lead on the shank, but on our Ned Head, we opted to go with just one and then a wire. The reason we did that was so we find the cone does a really good job of holding the nose of the bait to the head, but then the wire keeper is lighter than the lead, so that also helps with the lift. So we wanted to get as much weight away from here as we could, so that again, lift. That was the intention there. You know, all that said, the Ned Head is an incredible Ned Head. People love fishing Ned Heads. There's a time and place for them. But one of my favorite ways to fish the Ned Bug is with the football head. I love dragging it, especially out deep with a big football head. It's awesome, but it pairs well with everything that we've got.
I know this is a detour a little bit from the baits, but talking about the rod lineup, right? So you guys came out with a series of 3 rods. So you came out with 7-4?
Yeah, I have them. Yeah, one sec. Actually, I got 2 things to show you. So before we get into this, let me show you something. So I think I told you when we first started talking that we made our own rods, right?
Yeah.
So this is one of the original rods built on a North Fork blank with the microwave guides that we have in the new rods we're talking about. And we've got I've got 8 of these rods built on North Fork, super low key. We wanted them to be like very stealthy on the deck. We didn't want to draw any attention to them because we never want anyone to ask questions. That was like, we built these rods to fish these little micro baits, really to get them away from the boat further than what was on the market. That was really the initial intention, was to try to get like an extra, like with the added length and those microwave guides, we're able to get like 20, 30 more feet per cast, which is huge when you're trying to create separation between big pressured fish and get extra distance for like a hair jig, for example. That was really when we first built these rods, was to maximize a hair jig distance. And then it turned into like a sneaky underspin, Cindy rig, just all these little microbait rods as we refine the technique. So that's the original.
Well, kind of building on that too. So it's not just a super finesse bait thing either. Like my buddy Nathan went out last fall and he told me this story. He was out last fall with his buddy and he was catching like 3 to his buddy's 1 fish because he was able to cast that bait like 10 feet further. And so just having a longer rod, having the right rod, having, a specific setup for your gear is really critical.
100%.
That's why, like, especially for Great Lakes guys, like a lot of people talk about drop shotting with like a 610 medium light drop shot rod with like no power in it. Or they talk about throwing a tube on like a 7-foot rod. But when you start to talk to Great Lakes guys who are trying to trick these really smart old fish in clear water or in pressured situations, like you have to have the right setup for fishing Great Lakes. Like it's not the same as going and throwing it to
100%. 100%. I agree with all that. So the rods, we were getting asked, it had to average about 5 to 6 times a day where I had to answer the question, what rod do I use for these baits? And it never sat well with me because we make our own rods. So I can't tell someone to go buy a rod that I don't personally use because we make our own. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, I think like we have an opportunity to fill this long rod, medium light action gap in the market that exists, because I'm not going to send people to go buy a rod that's not built for these. And so we set out to do that. And when we decided to do that, I'm just going to kind of give you a bit of a backstory before I tell you the features.
Yeah.
We didn't set out. Let me backtrack. Most rod companies define a certain price point that sells well in the market, and they build to that price point because they believe that let's make the nicest rod at that price point. Our approach was, we're going to build the best possible rod for us that's going to be totally focused on performance. So what are the things that are important? Casting distance is extremely critical. That's probably like the number one. With casting distance comes further separation, more line out there, so the need for sensitivity. And then, so the sensitivity and the distance were truly the focus. So if you think about those two things, and then obviously durability, everyone wants a rod that's durable. That's like comes without question. We just went to work on like, okay, let's make the best possible rod, find the best components we possibly can to achieve that. So these are the Finesse CX line of rods. They're really nice. People have probably seen videos. So the first thing is it's built on a super high quality blank that we designed. It's wrapped in an X pattern. We worked with the factory to build our own extremely high modulus carbon blank that would be durable but crisp. And what I mean by crisp is we wanted it to be, most people can relate to this. When you have a cheap rod and you throw it out there, it's like wobbly. So when you move the bait, your rod has a lot of wobble into it and you can't quite feel things. So with this blank, you're getting crazy sensitivity and extreme durability because the wrap is in an X pattern. So that's our X carbon blank. The second thing is, when it comes to sensitivity, is the latest technology in the best rods on the planet. So I'm talking about like, your Poison Ultimas, like your like super high end rods. This is a full one piece ergo carbon molded handle. So it's essentially the same material as the rod. So when you secure this, it's like a full through, like the blank goes all the way through this carbon handle and it's secured to the blank. You're essentially, by holding this handle, you're essentially holding the blank. So you've eliminated the need to put a finger on a rod or have a gap in here. So it allowed us to create a really comfortable handle that won't slip, super light and extremely sensitive, to the point where this thing is so sensitive. And I know this is going to sound crazy, but the first time you fish a full one-piece carbon handle, you need to relearn how to set the hook at the right time, because you're going to find that, I kid you not, the first time I started fishing, my other ones didn't have this carbon handle. So this was new to us because it didn't exist back in the day when we were making our own. So here's a really good example. So a hair jig or a finesse jig, or sorry, a sneaky underspin. Most anglers, if they're using a regular rod, their rod is just going to load up. They're like, when they're reeling, they're not going to necessarily feel the bite. That doesn't happen with this handle. You feel the bite, like it feels like a very defined tick. And because you're not reacting to a rod loading up and you're reacting to a flick, you immediately set the hook and you're setting the hook too early. Like, it's that crazy. So like Matt and I, when we first got the first prototypes, we're losing fish like crazy because we're like, this is unbelievable. We're feeling more stuff than we ever thought we'd feel. So that's how sensitive the handles are. And this is funny because people were laughing at the guides and I knew they looked goofy because that was my reaction when we first put them on, like when we first discovered them at ICAST, when we met the guys at American Tackle who makes these guides. They're patented, only they have the patent to this. It's a technology that funnels the line through this first guide and shooting straight out of that first guide so that you're getting less friction throughout the rod. Like, it's no longer looping once it's through the first guide. So you get extra distance. They look really, in my opinion, dumb. But from a performance perspective, I knew that when we were building these rods, that if we put these rods, I'm going to have to spend more time explaining these dumb guides than if we just went with a cheaper regular guide. These are 3 times more expensive than the nicest possible guides you can find on some of the highest end blanks. These are like the highest end microwave guides they make. And so yeah, those guides give you this crazy distance combined with the length of the rod. So for example, the 7/8 medium light, you can just bomb these baits way out there. You can feel every little thing, like the fish breathes on it, or you've got moss on your bait, 120, 130 feet out, you can feel the moss on your hook and you're like, oh, there's moss on it. I got to pull the bait back in so I'm not wasting this cast or dragging through with something on my hook or whatever, right? Like you feel every little pebble. And yeah, we never really focused on the price, and we just determined like we're going to build the Ferrari of finesse rods, and then the price is going to be the price, and this is where it ended up. It had nothing to do with we had no idea where the price was going to be when we got to the finish line. We're just like, well, that's what it costs to have a carbon handle, like that blank, which we were presented with many options of blanks that were significantly cheaper and looked the same, quite frankly. And I was like, well, that's not what I want to fish, so we're not going to do that. We'll go with the one that's like twice as much money. And that's where we ended up. So our intention was never to replace everyone's rod lineup. So if you're already fishing, St. Croix or, TFO or, Loomis, we have no intention of going after the rod market. We were just trying to create some specific tools for specific situations for a guy who just was not able to get what they need. And the result to me is you're not going to catch 2 times as many fish, but you might catch 1 or 2, maybe 3 more fish in the day in a tournament, which could be the difference between winning the tournament and not catching a check. So that's what we achieved there.
So you have basically 3 different models, right?
Yes. Yeah, we got 3. Sorry, I was just reading comments. Yeah, so we've got, my favorite rod is the 7/8 medium light fast action. So pretty whippy in the top end for bombing the baits out, good parabolic action. But on the bottom end, it's got really good backbone. So if you got to turn that fish around the boat or get around a trolling motor, other advantage of a super long rod is when you're around the trolling motor and be able to put your rod in and get around the trolling motor, something a lot of people don't think about. But yeah, the 7/8, that's your hair jig, Cindy rig, and sneaky underspin rod. Those are the 3 baits that I use it for. You can throw other baits on it, but those are what that rod was built for. And then we've got a 7/4 medium light, which is it's honestly my drop shot rod. I love a longer drop shot rod for many reasons, but one of the biggest reasons is we like using light line. That extra length in the rod allows the rod to absorb shock, kind of like a steelheader with a 13-foot rod using light line, little hooks. It's the exact same thing. When I set the hook with a longer medium light rod on drop shot, that fish can swim around, do whatever it wants, and it's not coming off. So I love that for that, but it is a really versatile rod. It can pretty much fish all the baits in the lineup. It's got, you could fish a hair jig with it. Will you get the same distance as the 7/8? No, you're going to get a little bit less. So if you really want that extra 5 or 10 feet, the 7/8 is the one you'd want to go with. But from a versatility standpoint, you can drag these little Neds, the Juvie Craw, the little swim bait, hair jig, drop shot. That's our do everything. If you were just going to have one rod to fish all of GLF stuff, that would be the one. And then we got a 7/8 medium heavy, which is our Juvie Craw, tube, and jig rod. So medium heavy doesn't sound very finessey, but there's no one making a medium heavy in that 7/8 range that allows you to get the crazy distance with a tube, a little tube or a little jig, and be able 2 things. One is you're able to get really good a really good hook set with the more stout. Let me grab one of these. So our Mini Pro tube head's got a more stout hook. So that really allows you to drive that home. And the other thing that most people don't realize when they're using a whipper, I shouldn't even tell people, but anyway, the biggest thing is when you're snagged or you're trying to get over rocks. So say you're you cast, right? And you're dragging and you get hung up. And you're like, most
Yeah.
with a whippy rod, all they're doing is going like this with their rod, and the bait's not doing anything. With a long, medium, heavy rod, you can pop that over those like sticky spots so much better. Like it's night and day. So it allows you to be more efficient, get better hook sets. You can control those fish. And when you finally fish a 7/8, so here's the background on this. Full disclosure, when I used to work for Rapala, we tried to make rods. We were terrible at it. We did a very bad job. But the one thing that I pulled out of that experience was we worked with, I didn't personally, but they were on our pro staff. I was kind of still new to the game. I was really young. I was only like 16, or no, like 16 when I was pro staff. I was working for them when I was like 20. Mike DeForge and Derek Strug, who are like legends locally here as like the first big water tournament guys who like won the CFT on like Erie. Like they were like, Derek Strug is still a beast on the Great Lakes. He was the guy that initially came out that like brought this idea to Rapala to build like it was called a Shift 7/8. And long story short, company did a terrible job of promoting this rod. No one understood it. I got my hands on them. A handful of guys that were at the company and the pro staff, we all got our hands on them. I still got like 6 of them. Guys keep breaking them. You can't get them anymore. And it was to the point where I was like, hey, like if I'm going to build the perfect rod, I want to model it off that exact action that we still have. It's actually embarrassing. Like I go fishing with Travis Manson and you'd see this old janky Rapala rod and like that's my tube rod, and it's just so incredible. And I have never been able to find a rod that he can even come close to giving you like just now that we've got these microwave guides in addition to that action. Before it was more about like the length gave you good distance, really good hook sets, really good control. Now we get even more distance with the same benefits of that 7/8 medium heavy. So it's kind of like an untapped, most people don't even think like fish a tube that way, but I've won more money dragging a tube or a Juvie Cross style bait or a little jig than anything else. And that's my rod. And I've yet to find anything that can match it. And every tournament partner I've had or anyone that like comes with me and I show them that, they always switch over. Like that's what they end up going with because they're like, wow, I didn't even realize that I had the wrong rod. So it's what I believe in.
The 7/4 is like the versatile rod. If you were probably just to tell someone, hey, you want to start into the Great Lakes Finesse rod lineup, go with 7/4, right?
Yeah.
But if Dan got to say, okay, I can only fish one of these rods, which one would you pick?
Well, if I can only fish one, it's the 7/4 for sure. Like if
really?
you were like, yeah, because if I could only pick one, I still want the length. I still want all the features of this rod. I mean, I want to have the ability to fish all the baits still because I fish all of them, right?
Yeah.
But if I'm only say like, you know, someone identifies as a crazy hair jig guy, then I would want the 7/8 medium light. Like if I was a hair jig specialist or whatever you want to call yourself, like these rods are truly intended for people who already fish finesse baits and they're good at it and they want to take their game to the next level. This isn't like let's dabble, you know, in some rods. Like that's not what these are. These are like, you know, and I kind of think of them like if someone was a crazy hardcore golfer, like they competed on their local tour or they, you know, they golfed every weekend. This is like that specialty club that allows them to do that one specific shot that they might only encounter like, you know, here and there, or they got that driver that gets them that extra distance over their regular clubs. Like that's kind of what I view these as. They're specialty tools designed for someone who feels like one or two more fish in the day truly matter and want to feel like, okay, I've got the best possible rod on the planet to fish these little micro baits. If I'm putting it in a nutshell, we didn't intend to just sell rods. I have no interest in that, honestly.
Dan's like, I really didn't care. To be honest, I just wanted to make some sick rods that I know I really.
Yeah, honestly, worst case scenario, I've got a full deck of these. Like,
yeah,
that's all that matters to me. And Matt and the guys that have worked on these, like we're all just pumped to have these things. And yeah, if that's the end result, it is what it is. I'm fine with that. And the other thing too is like, you know, I think about the customer a lot, and you know, I'd be wondering, okay, is this company, they're not a rod company. Are they going to take care of me? What's the warranty like and stuff? Like, what all I'll say to that is, like, GLF has built the brand on taking care of our customers. Like, we are not interested in just making a dollar and, you know, being profit driven. If someone has an issue with one of these rods, we're going to absolutely take care of them. Like, I'm the guy who runs the company. I'm the guy that, like, you can come to and say, hey man, I had an issue, and we're going to make sure that you're taken care of right. And if you're going to put your faith in our brand, you know, buy one of these rods, especially at the cost that they are. They're not cheap. They're not the most expensive. Like, they certainly compete at the for the highest level of rods in the industry. But honestly, like, I feel like even if it costs us, if we never made a dollar because we have to take care of customers, I'd rather do that than jeopardize our brand and who we are as a company.
Well, so here's a question for you. A question that came in was about cracking a tube. Is that something you guys really do? Or, like, is that something you guys do, or is it more so just like you just fish a tube, right? Because it's kind of like the mainstream way to fish it, but
I don't crack a lot of tubes, man. Like, it's not like I know, you know, Zona, and there's been videos of cracking a tube, but I mean, I would say 90% of the time I'm just dragging that thing along the bottom, you know, acting like a little craw and skirting around the bottom, and maybe I'll hop it a little bit or shake it or whatever I feel like I need to do. But I'm not like, I rarely do anything crazy where I'm like cracking it, or, I mean, that there's a time and place, no doubt, but it's not really what I do.
that's been something, like, to be honest, I've never been like a major tube fisherman. Like, it was never one of those baits that I picked up and was always like die hard for. But over the past probably 2 years, I've kind of gotten into it a little more. And I found, like, you can crack a tube and get bites. Like, my buddy Nathan was doing it and getting some bites. But, like, I feel like you almost get more bites in most situations just like slowly hopping a tube, like get to bottom, hop it a couple times.
Yeah, I mean,
or just drag it. But, like, there's time and place for sure. It's just never been one of those things where I've seen it like on a consistent basis. If you were just going out and that was like your main retrieve with a tube, that was just never something that I got into.
Yeah, same. I don't get me wrong. Like, sometimes I'll try it if I know there's fish there and I think I need to get them to react. But I feel like there's other baits that I'll throw if I need a reaction bite. One of your you got a question there, like, is the 7/8 medium head good for cracking a tube? Absolutely. I mean, it's stiff, like, it's good, it's whippy on the top, but like really solid backbone. Like I said, it's going to drive that hook. The biggest thing I think people will notice when they first hook a fish with that medium heavy, that 7/8 medium heavy, is the amount of control they have. Like, when you first set the hook on a tube, everyone can relate to this, especially if it's like near, like, way, like at the beginning of your cast, like way out there. That thing jumps and most people feel like, oh my gosh, I'm at the mercy of this thing, please stay on, right? I don't feel that way when I've got a 7/8 because I feel like I can turn that fish's head. Oftentimes what I'll do, and this is another secret, with the 7/8, oh man, I'm giving up the juice. No. Won a lot of money fishing a tube, and here I am just dishing it out. The 7/8 allows you to put your rod all the way down in the water to keep those fish from jumping. So that extra length, that extra foot, can mean the difference between that fish breaching water and spitting the tube and not. So what I'll do is, when I know that I've got that fish hooked, as soon as I set the hook, I bury my rod into the lake and almost on my knees at times to keep that fish from jumping. So what will happen is most people will just like, and the fish is like flopping in the air, 4 feet in the air. I'm like, boom, drop that rod right down. I'm reeling, and I'll just see, like, the fish is trying to jump, but it can't because the rod is nearly 8 feet down in the lake, and all it's doing is boiling. And I get full control, and I can turn the fish, and you just feel like finally, like, I'm in control, rather than you're at the mercy of this smallmouth.
I love that.
Yeah. So that's my take on it anyway. Whatever you want to make of it. That's what I do.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So are you fishing, like, how light are you fishing on that 7/8 medium heavy? Are you fishing like all the way down to a 1/4 ounce?
Oh
like
man,
less on them?
I'll do 8 ounce, whatever. If it's a stout hook, like a jig, like a finesse jig, or there's some football heads out there, like your Beast Coast sniper jig there, the open
Oh
water.
yeah,
I mean, this would be the perfect rod for it.
that's
Uh,
what I was thinking about actually.
yeah, like it's the perfect rod for that. When we get into like the 3/8 ounce stealth football head, I feel like that's the perfect rod for it. I got more control. And then any size of like the Juby craw, like when we're fishing the tube head, just because that hook is stout, 8 ounce all the way out to like half ounce, and you just feel like, man, I've got full control of my bait. I can maneuver around these sticky spots. When I get a bite, that fish is coming in the boat. It's all around just positive when you've got that power with a tube or a jig.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So let's kind of talk about the Juby Craw real quick and some of the new colors, really, because I think the Juby Craw kind of shows off a lot of the new colors. But like one of my favorites probably is this Matte 309.
Yeah.
I love this. I love this color. It reminds me of like did you ever fish the Steiger Ice color from Poor Boys?
You know what? I have seen that color. I fish this in a different brand, but like, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a good color.
Yeah.
But essentially, Matte 309, for those of you that don't know, it's like almost an amber with purple and gold flake, and then a pearlescent blue purple bottom.
Yeah.
It's a really, really, really cool color. And this is available in this? So it's available in the Juby Craw. It's available in the Drop Minnow.
And the
Hover
drop
Minnow.
minnow. Yeah. Yep. It's a really cool color. I think that adding that matte finish to that color just was a game changer. We looked at that color as a color we had used in the past, and I'd always tried to like rub the shine off it, because that was one of my pet peeves with the companies that made that color, was they're just so shiny and plasticky looking. So we try to rub that shine off. So we just figured, okay, we'll make a matte version of this, call it Matte 309. It's kind of a, if you know in the north. And then we rolled with it. Yeah, we caught a bunch of fish on it, and we're really happy. We think it works a lot better than the OG. And yeah, it's a sick color. We're happy with it. Yep.
And then you guys also have Goby, which like on the website sort of look very similar.
Yep.
When you get them in your hand, they are, I don't want to say they're totally different colors, but they're a different color, right? Like this has a lot more black, has some gold. I don't even know if it has any purple.
It's like a darker brown, a light brown on top, as opposed to like a green pumpkin. So yeah, it is a lot different. I get that comment a lot from people, like, oh, why would you need Math 309 and Goby? But when you actually see the two, you're like, oh, okay, I can definitely see a pretty big difference there. And those are my two favorite colors in the minnow. But then also the biggest one that I really smash them on is this it's this green pumpkin shad.
Yeah, I love that
perch so good. Yeah, it mimics perch incredibly well.
That is a really, really cool color. The other one is the Shiner color. Is the Shiner color only going to be available through Omnia, or is that available?
No, they've got an exclusive on it for 3 months.
Okay.
So yeah, those guys are hilarious. Like, I've become really good friends with those guys, and like they're just so cool, like down to earth, and like knowledgeable anglers. And they'd been bugging me about doing an exclusive, but the challenge with it for so long was we could barely keep up with demand on our existing stuff. So like we didn't need to do exclusive colors. It would become a distraction. We didn't want to like alienate dealers and stuff. So we were kind of like, oh man, and I kind of turned them down a while. And then I was at ICAST, and I was in line getting my coffee in the morning before I went to the booth, and Seth Fighter corners me. He's like, hey man, can we do this? Because he's like with Omnia, right? He's like, can we do a custom? I was like, how do you say no to Seth, right? So
yeah,
like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
Like, we'll do it. So yeah, I met with those guys, and then we came out with that color, which I think is so sick. Like,
that's a really cool color.
Yeah,
it's good. Almost like a translucent gray, like almost a greenish hue, like a greenish gray hue on the back, and then just black flake and a pearlescent belly, which is a really cool color.
Yeah, the name Shiner, I mean, we kind of think about like when you're like ice fishermen, they buy shiners, like little like they perch fish with them and stuff. They're super
Oh
like
yeah,
they just look like that. So that was kind of the inspiration for that color. But yeah,
that's sweet.
that's yeah, really excited about those. One of the really good ones that I'm really happy we added was like the green pumpkin blue flake.
Yeah,
That was a needed color. A lot of people like were bugging us for that color, so added that in a lot of the stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of really new colors. We haven't even talked about them on our social medias or anything, but wicked new colors in the Juvie Craw, really good new colors in the Snack Craw. I think we added 9 new colors in the Drop Minnow, the Hover Minnow. Like we went pretty hard on new colors, and it was all just stuff that we felt like we had been missing and people were asking for.
I got a couple packs of the Morning Dawn stuff, and my girls saw them in the box, and they went and they're like, "Can we have some of the worms? Can we have some of the worms?" And they took all like half a pack of my Morning Dawn, and they're playing.
Yeah, yeah.
This is that green shad. Like this is, or is it green shad? Green pumpkin shad.
Yeah.
This one is so cool. Like of all the colors that I think you guys have come out with, it's like watermelon pearl for
Yep.
me, and like this color right here. Like this
That
just
will,
looks so good for like a little perch color.
yeah. The watermelon pearl is really cool, but I think that color there, this green pumpkin shad, has taken over. It seemed pretty automatic when we were testing it and dialing in the color when we were out there last year. Like especially when we're out deep and stuff, it seemed like that color really did well for us.
What I like is it's more translucent, right? Like your watermelon pearl is obviously very flat. It's very matted out. And like this is almost a little more translucent to it, and I really like that.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's all really like stuff that I felt like, I mean, this is stuff we've been working on for 2 years. So finally nice to be able to talk about it and not have to hide it. And, every time, I have a buddy in the boat, you're hiding all the stuff and putting the baits away. And so, yeah, it's kind of a relief. And that Ned Bug, like I said, was, if people understood the challenges and me pulling my hair out and being frustrated and ready to pull the plug on it. I remember having conversations with Matt, and he's like, Matt's my tournament partner, and he's like, man, we can't give up. I'm like, dude, I'm not releasing this. Like, we can't. Like, I'm not going to let people just lose fish. Like, it's worse than a frog, right? Like, it was terrible. So yeah, I was really pumped. Like, Matt would probably, like, if he was here to tell you the story, he'd be like, yeah, you look pretty embarrassing how excited you were when you figured that out. I was excited.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So how much of it is tinkering, right? Like, do you take other baits and do you start with other shapes that you like and then modify to fit kind of your need? Like, by nature as fishermen, right? We are spending our time trying to like get a certain profile, get a certain action, get a certain design.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how much of kind of all of this is like taking what you like from other baits and refining and refining and refining, getting your prototype, refining some more? Like,
yep.
How much of that happens for you? Cutting it up?
It used, well, a lot of modifications happen on the water, like trimming the bait, like cutting sides off, or cutting things down. A lot of that happens on the water. I'm really fortunate now, with Pradco. Like, a lot of it before was like taking pieces of, like, when I was first doing this, I would like take other baits and like cut them up, melt them, glue them together, like to try to come up with like shapes and stuff. And now we've got all our design is in-house, our mold cutting is in-house, prototyping is all done in-house. I've got an incredible designer that I work with. His name's Tyler Duval. The guy's a beast. He's young, he loves it. He's like as excited about making these baits perfect as I am, and it's really fun. So now I find more on the design front, we're more imagining, and then he's kind of like building the prototype based on that, and then we're going from that, which is kind of a new frontier, and it's really exciting because I feel like now we're really starting to do stuff that like no one's doing. Like, we're working on something right now that is pretty, in my opinion, quite groundbreaking, like patented type of stuff. So we're working on a patent because we're like, this is going to change a lot of things. So it's cool being able to like do things now that no one's doing at all, and having that capability. And I think the biggest example of that was the Juvie Craw when we launched that thing last year. Just being able to develop that bait, and like most people, I mean, this bait has become so popular. It's still like a top seller for us, but most people have no idea the like little differences inside, like, you know, different thicknesses depending on where in the bait we need it to be thicker and where it needed to be thinner, and like, you know, the ability to cut and add detail around the entire bait. Like, people have no idea how hard that is and challenging that is, and there's probably only 2 or 3 companies in this industry that can achieve that level of detail and sophistication with their bait, especially on the soft plastic side. So really exciting. I feel like now we're really starting to scratch the surface on like true innovation, as opposed to just doing what everyone else is doing. And
It is so
you know,
interesting.
mm-hmm.
Like when you actually take the bait and you start looking at it. I've been hearing you talk about it, and I'm like playing with the bait and feeling like different sections of the lure. Like this belly section of the bait is a little bit thinner than the tail, and like,
Yep.
or the head, I guess. But really,
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah, like for example, on the Juvie Craw here, I'll stick a tube jig head in there. So you stick that thing in there. If anyone's ever fished our tube head, they'll know like the design of it and how it's flatter on the bottom, and it's got the stand-up design, so you get better hook sets, doesn't get stuck as much. But like, so a couple things. This section here of the tube is thicker, but it's just the right amount of thickness so that the whole eye doesn't come right through. Like, we didn't want the whole eye to poke out. That's a huge miss by most companies. They like come up with these, like, they think they got the right design and then they miss the important detail, like how much of the eye should come through. Like, there's one brand that knocked off our tube head and then they totally screwed it up with the lead. They put the lead way too far from the eye. Like, they thought they'd be like, oh, we'll take their design and sell and knock them off, and these guys are shady. But anyway, but they totally missed the point of hiding the eye halfway in the plastic. So that way, the key to that is that the more buried and closer it is to the tip of the bait, the less gunk you get, the less snag you get. It's so critical. And we have more meat in the plastic here than on the bottom, so that way it doesn't, like, when you set the hook, it doesn't like blow through. And then the other thing that most people still don't know is we like to rig it like exposed sometimes, kind of manipulate the bait a little bit to get it to sit right. But essentially there's more meat in the head. Anyways, that was a bad job of it. I got to really redo that. But anyways, it ends up kind of looking something like that. But there's enough plastic there you can bury the hook in to the head, just between the tentacles, and it's thicker there because we wanted to be able to do that. So like little things like that, you know, those are those things you add when you fish it for a full season. And that's the benefit of doing it right and fishing it and understanding all the little nuances of the bait and then refining it after that.
That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question for you. I'm sure other people have thought about this, but my question, and I still find myself in this dilemma, is when do you fish a hover minnow versus a drop minnow? Right? Like, a lot of times for me, the main, I guess, determining factor is how they're eating it, right? Like, if I can just wind a drop minnow around and semi-mindlessly, like, just steady wind or throw a couple pauses in it, like, that's when I'll pick up the drop minnow. But if I see them trailing that bait a lot and, like, I need to manipulate the action of that bait to get them to eat it, like, that's when I'll pick up a hover minnow.
Yeah, you just answer your own question. Like,
Okay.
you know. You know what's
I think
up.
I just
I've seen your
myself.
content. No, you've seen it, right? You know that the hover minnow with the cup belly. Oh, that's another bait we added for this release. So we got a new size. We got the 3.25 inch. People wanted a bigger size. So when you add like a jig head to it, ends up being about 4 inches, which is like that sweet spot, especially for smallmouth for the jig and minnow game. But that cup belly, which we're the only ones to have a cup belly in our minnow, does 2 things. It spirals on the fall, so it's got like a death spiral, which drives those fish crazy. But when you're working the bait back, so say like a traditional like drop minnow, for example, when you're doing this, I mean, you're trying to get a roll. I'm not, everyone's trying to get a roll. Anyway, we won't get into that. But what's happening with a regular jig head is going up, down, up, down, up, down, just going like, right? So that's the action it sees when you're like dropping it, lifting it, dropping it, switching it. We wanted was a bait that would dart side to side. So when you twitch this one, it's actually going to like dart to the side. You flick it, it'll dart the other way, and then back. It'll hover. We call it hover darting. So it's a completely different look. And then the amazing thing with this bait that other jig and minnow baits you cannot do is it gives you the opportunity when you feel like, okay, that fish is not going to bite. You can kill the bait. It's going to spiral down the bottom and it's going to land straight on its belly. And those fish will come right down. And that's your opportunity to be able to just kind of like move it a little bit. And that tail is just off the bottom like this. And we get so many of those non-committal fish to bite when it hits the bottom and it lands perfectly on its belly. And it lands on its belly every time because it's so wide back here. And the design of the head, that keel, it always lands on its belly. Like we watch it like up shallow and stuff. So like I've got some videos out like on our socials and stuff, and we can I'm like talking through it. I'm like, I'm seeing a fish in 6 feet of water, 8 feet of water. I'm like, oh, here he comes. Oh, okay, he's not gonna eat. Kill it. I like kill it. It spirals down. The fish just comes down. I move it a little bit. Boom, sucks it in. And I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't have caught that fish had I not been able to kill the bait and it not sit the way it sits. And then what that led to over the last summer, which we didn't even know because we're still learning about this bait, is that this is an incredible bait dragged on the bottom. We drag this bait half the time now, and it just scoots along the bottom like a little goby or a minnow feeding on the bottom, and now this has become a dragging bait for us.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's really funny because the first time I ever started to see the action of this or the power of this was, I think it came out, what, at ICAST?
Mm-hmm.
And so I got it right when I was going to St. Clair. And I was throwing I think I was throwing this or trying to throw this I started with the drop minnow. I was throwing it, kind of got fish to follow, and those fish were super smart after the open and after the invitational, like super, super smart. Wouldn't bite a bait. But you could take the hover minnow and you could get them to follow it, and you basically pop it up and get them to chase away from it, and when it would spiral down,
Yep.
On that spiral was the deal. And that's when I really started to be like, okay, so you basically start with a drop minnow. In my opinion, you start with a drop minnow. If they don't go on the drop minnow, like that's when you can start to pick this bait up and get it to do something different to get those fish to bite it.
Yeah. The spiral is so wide. Anyone who actually fishes this bait, if they're using forward-facing sonar, the spiral is so wide that it looks like it's zigzagging down the screen. Like all the other jig and minnow baits, you just see a line going down. This one's like, and you're like, holy smokes. And you can see the fish and they're following the zigzag and you're like, and they get it. And it's just so different. Like they just don't see it and no one else does it. It's cool.
Yeah.
That's what we were going for. We were just trying to, when we developed the bait, this was when we were using the Cindy rig. Again, we were developing this. It's crazy the timing of the hover minnow because we were developing it before the jig and minnow thing became a huge deal. And it was because we were trying to figure out a solution for the fish that weren't eating the Cindy rig. So we wanted to have a 1-2 punch approach, like Cindy rig, reel it. Okay, they're not eating it. What can we do? Well, we knew that smallmouth love side to side darting action, like a jerk bait. And we also knew they like spiraling action. So we're like, hey, how do we achieve that? That's when we came up with the cup belly in this bait. And, you know, we talk a lot about smallmouth, but man, walleye smash this thing. Pop this thing up and it like zigzags down. Like we get a lot of
the first fish I caught on it was a walleye. A walleye just suspended over open water, and I thought it was a big smallmouth. And it's
probably a better walleye bait than it's a smallmouth bait. Like I get guys messaging me all the time, like, dude, your hover minnow crushes walleye, and I'm like, yeah, I know. Like I know.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
So another question on this thing is, how much are you like straight reeling it and then dropping it, and how much are you like shaking it to get it to dart?
You can, I mean, just kind of like flicking your rod. So you're like reeling it and you're just kind of like doing this. I mean, the nice thing, so a lot of those like Sakamata shads and those other like baits where you're trying to achieve that roll, you need a pretty specific rod to actually really do a good job of that. you can get away with like not the right rod and still get really good action because of that cup belly. So it's kind of like a cheat code to getting action out of a jig and minnow bait, and it's just different. So yeah, you don't need to be a super high-end pro that knows how to work the jig and minnow perfectly, like some of these like elite guys with tip rods and stuff. That makes sense.
I was just curious because, like, to be honest, if I'm fishing a minnow, I am normally 90% of the time I'm not shaking it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not really a minnow guy. Like, I'm not a guy that's going to try to scope them with a minnow over, crazy amounts of water and open water. That's just not a lot of my style. But, like, when I'm fishing it in, a mid-depth range or like a medium-depth flat, to get this bait to do something different is kind of my thought, right? Like to get it to do that darting action. Like I need to figure that out. I see that as like something different I can do to get fish to bite. Maybe,
Yeah, just twitching it, figuring out that cadence, and you'll get the bait to like spiral, or sorry, not spiral, but dart. It's like a hover darting. Like you're not really gonna see it. It's small bait, right? So it's not going to be like exaggerated like a jerk bait. It's just like a subtle like if it's further away from the boat, it is hard to see, but it is doing that, and that's where the underwater footage came out. Like if you see our underwater footage of it, you'll see it doing it, and it was because we're analyzing the underwater footage that we're able to figure out the action and dial that in. The first time we built the bait, we thought it was a dud because we were fishing it with a ball head, and the thing would flip upside down and sink to the bottom upside down. And I'm like, oh, well, that's not going to work. So we thought it was a complete failure. We literally scrapped the project for like 3 weeks, and then I tried and then I was like, okay, we got to try our this head with it, and it worked so much better. And then I was like, okay, like that's the solution, is this head with the bait, and then we dialed in the bait to match the head better. And that's kind of how that progressed. But it's pretty funny how these things go. I was actually talking with Travis Smallmouth Crush yesterday off air, and we were joking around about how we spend so much time out there, and everyone's shaking a minnow out there. And Travis and I were like, I mean, he was more emphatic than I was, but he's like, that is not the best way to catch those fish out there. Like, there's so many better ways, and he's like almost angry that that's what like everyone thinks they need to do is shake a minnow, because it's just become like monkey see, monkey do on tour, right? Everyone's like, oh, that's how I have to win, right? And there's just so many better ways to, in my opinion, to get them to eat a lot of the time.
Yeah, I'm not a minnow shaker. I can count on like one hand the amount of times I've shaken a minnow out of fish.
Yeah. I mean,
it catches them, no doubt, but
yeah,
my preference, I'm not a minnow shaker.
Yeah, I noticed comment walleye bait. I'm all ears. Sneaky underspin. Do yourself a favor and throw that thing around some weed lines, and when they're up shallow or in like 12 feet or less, that is my sneaky little walleye bait. I catch more on the sneaky underspin than anything else.
I can't say I've caught a bunch on the sneaky, but most of the time when I'm fishing it, it's like 8 foot of water or less, and I know what I'm throwing around for the most part.
Yeah. No, you got to be targeting walleye. Like I find when I'm working a weed line or something, when I'm going out and trying to get food. That was actually how we got onto the sneaky underspin. Was we had initially, when we were first playing with these, is Braden, the guy I started the company with, him and I started trying to experiment with this for walleye. It ended up being an incredible walleye bait, and then I started using it for smallmouth, and it worked for them too. But I would say it catches walleye just as good, if not better. It catches walleye just as good, if not better, than smallmouth, and it also catches brook trout and steelhead, and like I call it the lake vacuum. It catches pike, walleye, or muskie, like pretty much everything. Like panfish, crappie, perch. Like it's I've nicknamed it the lake vacuum, because you can just if you got your wife or kid in the back of the boat, give them one of these, and they're just going to catch fish all day, and you don't know what they're going to catch.
So that's such a good bait. I never understood it until it took me a while.
Yeah.
Well, you have anything else coming up, Dan? I mean, are you going to the Classic?
Yeah. We'll have a booth there. I'm trying to think. We do have a hair jig coming out. Here, I got one here, I think. that's going to be available in May. I'll just pull one out. Let me see here. So, you know, a hair jig isn't a revolutionary product in the fishing industry. Seems like everyone's making one now, but we were getting, you know, being GLF and all the content we put out, we were getting asked a lot what hair jigs. Essentially, what we were doing in the past was building them on our Stealth ball head, which is a powder coated and baked finish. And so what we did was we're like, okay, well, let's come up with a hair jig. We'll build it how we like to fish them. I'm calling it the no nonsense marabou jig. There's a lot of nonsense right now in the marabou jig category, which I'm like, they're overcomplicating a hair jig. If anyone actually knows what they're doing, like they're like, hey, that is ridiculous. But biggest things are really fluffy marabou. So really high quality marabou. There's different marabou, and you can get bad marabou and you get good stuff. And this is the good stuff, the right stuff that's going to give you the action. It's built on a Gamakatsu 604 one-aught hook. So it's perfect for smallmouth. We added a little bait keeper in the back. So there's this. Initially, when I first started fishing marabou jigs, I would just throw like a little chunk of like Senko or something on the back, because I was kind of like, oh, that's what you got to do. That's what the fighter tells you to do to get distance or whatever. And what I've learned is I don't have any like readily available, but our drop minnow in black, matte black, as a hair jig trailer, again, giving up the secrets because we're talking about hair jig. What it does is that neutral buoyancy, you still get the distance, but you can work the bait slower to you because the neutral buoyancy of the drop minnow keeps the bait up higher in the water column. So anyway, this is a product that's going to be available in May. It's not revolutionary. It is a no nonsense. Everything that matters in a hair jig is in this hair jig, and it's going to get the job done. It's not going to chip. It's built on the best hook, in my opinion, for a marabou jig. Powder coated and baked, like I said. The eye is kept clean in the manufacturing, so you don't have to break any paint. And I don't know about you, but as soon as my old hair jigs, I used to tie I'd tie them all, and before I'd even bake them and I was lazy and I wouldn't actually bake them. I just like paint them, and then I'd hit a rock and I'd get a chip in it. They wouldn't bite it as soon as the paint's chipped. Like it's junk, right? So I'd be using a Sharpie or whatever. And anyway, this one's not going to chip on you. It's going to last all day. You're going to catch a pile of fish. It's going to hold your bait, and you're going to land a lot of fish, and you're going to get the job done. And like I said, the no nonsense marabou jig is coming.
I love it.
Yeah, it's going to come in brown. Honestly, black is all you really need, but we're gonna add some extra colors for guys. There's a lot of crazy colors being thrown out in the world right now. So yeah, like your brown. This is a cool color. I'm pretty excited about it. We've tried it. It works pretty good. It's like an olive. You can't really see through the package. It's olive and black, straight olive, and then brown orange. Those are going to be the colors. 2 sizes. We're not going to overcomplicate it. It just comes in either 8-ounce or 330 seconds. 330 seconds is honestly all you need for the most part. Black, and there you go. You got yourself a marabou jig that is going to get the job done for you. That we fish. So that's it. Since you asked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's on the round head, right? That's on your Stealth ball head.
Yeah, it's on the Stealth ball. I mean, people are doing all sorts of things now. I'm seeing all kinds of head shapes. I'm seeing eyes. I'm seeing, oh boy, just like everyone's throwing features at a hair jig, and I'm like, this is like the most uncomplicated bait. Like, it does not need to be complicated, and we're turning it into this like crazy contraption now. So anyway,
the biggest thing for me, when you look at a hair jig and you look at a good hair jig, like having good marabou and having it tied well,
yep,
and having a good hook.
That's it. That's all you need.
All there is.
All you need. That's all you need. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I was gonna quit. What head do you tie it on? So we tie it on our own. It's our own head, but we designed. Let me see if I got the prototype. We actually designed a specific head for, oh man, I'm never going to find it. I got a million samples here. Oh boy. Yeah, it's not going to happen. But we built it on, we took the concept of the stealth ball head, which is this head here, which is a jig head that we sell. It's got a double cone collar. And what we did was we eliminated the second cone and we added the wire bait keeper. Oop. Sorry, I'm throwing things around. Stuff's fluffy, like really fluffy. So we added that little keeper there. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's going to hold your whatever trailer you want on there. So that's all you need. I mean, that's, like I said, we used to just use the stealth ball head, and then before we tied the marabou on, we would just tie a keeper on there, and then we'd tie the marabou. But we just figured we'll redesign the head so it's the keeper's built in before we tie the marabou on. So yeah, it's a custom head for it.
That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah. So I'm just thinking for Bassmaster. I mean, that's 2 weeks away. That doesn't leave me much room for new products between now and then. I think that's all I can. I feel like we've already given out a lot of stuff. It's been one heck of I mean, between rods, 2 entirely new baits, a new size. It feels like 100 new colors.
Do you like? Are you guys going to launch stuff at the Classic and iCast consistently?
Yeah, we got more stuff coming.
Oh my goodness!
It never ends for me. It never ends. Yeah, we got. I think people are going to be. I think people think they know what direction we're going in, and they're going to be wrong.
Yeah, he's going to come out with like a 6-inch minnow next or something. I'm just kidding, but
probably not.
Awesome.
I'm going to say no on those.
I'm going to say probably not, but
yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of hard work, but it's a lot of fun. Mainly because I'm designing like the perfect baits for me, and it's kind of the roots of the company. Like we were just trying to design baits for ourselves, and if we sell them, we sell them, and that still holds true today. It just happens that people like what we're making for ourselves.
Did you, like, when you came up with Great Lakes Finesse with Braden, did you see it getting to where it is today, or was there ever a real thought that it would get there? Or
never in a million years would I have thought that it would be. Like I said, we were like, oh, let's start a brand. We knew that this was like amazing. The biggest thing that I felt was going to be our biggest challenge was people understanding little small micro baits and light line fishing for big smallmouth. I really felt like there was a mental gap there in people's minds to associate, light line and tiny little, like we're talking about like little tiny little baits for like 6 and 7 pound smallmouth. And I thought that if we were ever going to become a reasonable sized company, it was going to cost us an absolute fortune to educate people on this technique. Can you hear me? Or
yeah, I got you.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I was just on mute for a second.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just went super quiet. So
sorry.
No, you're all good. Yeah, to answer your question, no, absolutely not. And it really just happened organically. Like we never spent any money on marketing. It was just like we started an Instagram page. We started posting our stuff, our pictures of fish. And, the first couple dealers got it, and guys started winning locally on our stuff, and the dealers were selling out. And it wasn't like everyone was coming and buying. It was like just determined guys were going and clearing the pegs. And then we were getting orders like crazy, and just got to the point where we couldn't even make stuff fast enough. We were trying to hire people, and got to the point where I think we had like 60 SKUs at one point, and we were only making 20 of them because those were the 20 top sellers, and we had no time or capacity to even focus on anything. So we're just always sold out of like not the top sellers.
That's crazy. Because I remember, so like you called me when you started Outdoor Pro Shops, I believe.
National Pro Staff.
And then there was like another company in between there, and you were like, hey, I'm also with Great Lakes Finesse. And at that point, I think you had like the Flat Cat, and you had the Drop Worm.
We had the drop worm, the flat cat, and the snack craw were the
Yep,
first
and those
three.
were the three.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, just so you know, like, have you seen this stuff? And we kind of talked about it a little bit, and I was with a different company. And then you came out with the drop minnow and the sneaky, and then I'm like, I remember the first time I took the sneaky and the drop minnow out, and it was like a crazy day.
Yeah.
Like, throw it on the calmest, flattest, calm day ever.
Yeah.
And I went out and I threw it, and I just smashed them.
Yeah.
And that was for me. Like, there is a bit of like a mental hurdle to get over. And then once you do that, I mean, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And that was only 3 years ago, dude.
That was 3 years ago that I was still working, running that other company, and this was supposed to be like a side thing, like just for fun. And I'm like, if we make like, an extra $1,000 a month, like, and I'm talking $1,000 Canadian, so that's like $200 US.
Yeah, exactly.
I was not expecting to make any money at it. It was just going to be like, cool, we'll throw it at our hobby, and at least at the very end, we're going to have baits that we love, and here we are, like just continues to go, and we just can't thank people enough for giving us a chance and believing in us and trying our baits, because they don't need to. They can fish anything and they choose us, and it's like it means the world to us.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, dude, I really appreciate you having me on, or hopping on here and chatting, because like it's so cool to hear kind of how these baits go from your mind into the physical form that they are.
Yeah.
But dude, I can't wait to get out and throw this stuff. Do you guys have a closed season?
It's open. I mean, they trick us, right? Like, it's open from January 1st until May 10th.
Okay.
But we can't. But all the lakes are locked up, so we can't go out there. We probably won't get out there till earliest will be like maybe second week of April is kind of where my head's at right now. Is that would be like, hey, you're getting pretty anxious to get out there. You're maybe a week early, but that's kind of where my head's at right now, is second week in April. And I actually got to go film the hair jig video, because that's something that needs to get done before we release in May. Cool. Yeah. So
cool. We're hoping for open water up here. We have probably open water on like the Great Lakes, but it's the time of year when you go out, and it's just, you might as well stay home.
Yeah. You're better off like not burning yourself out and beating yourself out. Beating yourself up. Yeah, I mean, most of the boat ramps for us, like St. Lawrence and stuff, like last week, guys were like going down the middle of the river in snowmobiles and stuff. So it's like you're just not getting out there for a bit. Yeah, it was pretty mild today. Like, we lost a lot of snow on like our front, like 2 or 3 feet of snow, and I think we lost like a half foot or close to a foot. So I'm a little more optimistic than I was 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man.
Yeah.
I really can't wait to fish some of this stuff, but I appreciate you hopping on. You have anything else before we hop off, or?
No. I think that just about covers it. If anyone wants to, back in the day we just like buy it from us, but now we've got so much support from really good dealers like Omnia, Tackle Warehouse. You can buy it direct from us. I think that code you got up, I
do have a code. So this is for LureNet. So I have all this stuff like linked down below. So anyone that wants to check this stuff out, like each product is linked by product, and then if you use code BENFISH at checkout, it'll save you 15%. So.
Okay. Yeah. So BENFISH. So if they're buying from LureNet, they just need to create like a free LureNet account, and that code will work. So that's critical. So just create a little free account when you go to checkout, and then you can punch that code in. Awesome. So LureNet's a really good option, and check out this new stuff. A lot of new colors that we haven't even really talked about on our social media. So if you go and dig around on the website, and if you go to lurenet.com right now, right on the homepage, if you click, there's like a takeover. You click on Learn More, and it'll take you to all the new products, new colors and stuff. You can see the rods. We got videos we did a 5-part series in the rods. So we did like an overview of all the rods, like a high level overview. And then we did a behind the design. So that kind of takes you into like our mindset of like the why we kind of did it, and and what we're about and what the rods kind of mean to us and what we try to achieve. And then if you're still interested in a rod at that point, we made a separate video for each rod to really break down the why that's the rod for the certain technique that you want to throw. So I feel like we did a pretty good job of providing that. You know, it's not a cheap purchase, and we want to give people the best possible information to make the best decision they could. And if anyone has any questions, they can just reach out to us, Instagram, or Instagram's the best because I'm like on there all the time. That's like probably 100 messages a day. I'm in there just chatting with people. So if anyone has any questions, happy to point you in the right direction.
That's awesome.
But,
yeah, so those links will take you to everything. So the rods are down there as well as all the baits, and like Dan said, like tons of new colors. So like Snack Craw, you now have your motor oil color, which is actually really, really, really cool color.
Yeah, I've got that one. That's my, if there was a color that I'm most excited about in the Snack Raw is the motor oil. That color has become probably a top 3 confidence color for me over the last like couple years.
It's really unique. It like changes colors in the water, and it's like,
yeah,
it's almost amber, like your a lot of your crawfish. So you can fish during the summertime with the amber color, but I don't know. It fishes great around rusty crayfish in northern Michigan.
Yeah, okay.
I'll promise you that.
There you go. Yeah.
And then Whiskey Barrel and the Juicy Hellgramite's pretty cool color too.
Yeah, it's kind of like a brown, it's like a light brown. Honestly, that was a miss in the first batch. That's why there's only one color edition for the Hellgramite. It was driving me crazy because it's such a good color, and I'm like, how did we miss that in that release? So, if you're going to buy 3 colors of the Juicy Hellgramite, which if you're not throwing a Hellgramite for smallmouth, you need to start. I would say I
still haven't figured it out. I threw it a little bit, and I'm like, I'm just missing that couple bites that'll get you that confidence.
Have you tried on a drop shot?
I have. That was like how I've thrown it the most.
So what I found with that bait is you pull that bait out when they won't eat anything else. That seems to be when it really shines. Like when you're like around fish and they're just biting everything, I find that like there's probably other options. But when you're like, man, like they're kind of being a little finicky, try the Hellgramite. And then Brown Pumpkin Special, that Whiskey Barrel, and Matte Black are the best colors for, in my opinion, if you're going to start fishing that bait.
Check that out. I'll have to try it. Yep. I've thrown the Brown Pumpkin Special. That's like about the only color I've thrown so far.
Yeah, maybe try the black. It might be a color thing. Some people swear by the Green Pumpkin Purple Gold. I don't use that one as much. I've used it and like it works. And then like some walleye guys are like obsessed with that color in the Hellgramite for walleyes. Like which I've never tried, but I have some guys who are close friends who are like that's the deal for them, which kind of blew my mind. Yeah, and then the Ned Bug is special. So if you've ever fished a Ned, try that like Ned Bug, or if you've never fished a Ned in general, and this is gonna be the first one, well then you're in for a good experience. I think if they bite it, I mean they bite it everywhere. We've tried it everywhere. It's incredible.
I got one more question, and then I'll let you go.
No rush.
Ned Bug versus the Juvie Craw, right? Like, when are you going to pick up a Juvie Craw? When are you going to pick up a Ned Bug? Are they pretty interchangeable for you, or is it more like
probably
a feel thing? Like you pick up the Juvie Craw, they don't want to get on it, or they're not getting it quite good.
I would say that I'm probably picking up the Juvie Craw first in most situations. If I'm arriving to a new spot, I'm going to have that on deck. But I'm also going to interchange them pretty quickly. So like, if I find that the Juvie Craw is starting to come down, I'll throw the Ned Bug. I would say that the Ned Bug seems to excel when the bite has gotten tougher. So if I'm really working a spot, like say I'm on a flat, I'm not going to leave and I'm just going to keep working that area and the bite's slowing down, the Ned Bug is something I'm definitely throwing, but also like interchanging the two. Yeah, that like probably the Juvie Craw is like what I'm going to start with. No different than if I'm drop shotting. I'm probably starting with a drop minnow. That's going to be what I start my if I roll up on a boulder, throwing a drop minnow. I'm throwing a 2.75-inch drop minnow. That's going to be like my number one. And then I'll go from there. And then I'll like, you know, maybe I'll throw the swim bait on there and I'll start rolling a swim bait, or I'll do a Cindy rig. Like, I mean, the nice thing about this is like when you really start getting into the micro baits for big smallmouth and you're around pressured fish, you start to realize why you need all these different baits, because it seems like, especially when you're in a sight fishing scenario where you're watching the fish, you could throw 10 different baits at that fish, and then all of a sudden you pick up a different one and they come over and hit it like so aggressively, and like, why? And then you go to the next fish and the next fish is completely different. Like, they don't want the bait you just caught the last one on, they want this other bait. So like when you're when we're fishing, especially when we're sight fishing in the clear water, we're tripping over rods because there's rods everywhere with baits hanging off of the edge of the boat. Like, it's just like literally like 8 to 10 rods, all with the baits just hanging over the edge of the boat, and we're just picking up the next one, throw it at the fish. No, okay, you throw that bait. Okay, you didn't eat it. Okay, throw it behind him. Nope, this way. Okay, throw that. And it's like, oh man, he wanted that. Cool, we got him. Like, that's,
and it's so funny because like that's what your company was bred out of, right? And now like you're building all these different things to kind of build onto that process of catching the most finicky fish in the lake.
Yeah. I mean, this is all stuff that like we feel like we need to present a different option to those fish that aren't biting the drop minnow, the juvie craw, the snack craw. Like, it's just, when people actually really get into this, and they'll start to realize that you can chase a fish around for a long time. Like, you can follow them and keep throwing baits at them and going baits, and you feel like you're harassing that fish, and all of a sudden you throw the right bait in front of them and they come right over and eat it like they've never seen a bait before. And you're like, holy smokes, like, that's incredible. And you can work a fish for a long time that's not on a bed. It might be a cruising fish or whatever, right? So, you know, it's just more things in the arsenal to throw. I just saw a question about where's LureNet based out of. It's based out of Arkansas. Fort Smith, Arkansas. That's Pradco's home base, and everything ships out of Alabama at the central warehouse there. That's where everything's stocked. All our baits are made, like all our plastics and stuff are made right in Fort Smith, Arkansas, in the factory.
And it ships fast.
Yeah, LureNet's like, it's like Amazon speed. It seems like not that fast, but fast.
It's pretty fast.
Yeah, like one of my pro staff the other day, they're like, hey, I want to try Shiner. And because it's exclusive, it's not available on LureNet. And I was like, okay, place your order. Let me know when your order's in, and I'll shoot the e-com team a message and let them know that you want to add like 3 packs of Shiner to it, and I'll just comp them to you. And he placed the order. Within like 5 minutes, I had sent the email saying, hey, add 3 bags to that order. Here's the order. And I got a response back like 5 minutes later. It's like, it's already packed. Like, so we're gonna have to create a separate order.
It's really
like, that's insane. Yeah, they was already packaged, like ready to go. And she's like, I don't even know, they won't even be able to find it because they're already, like, they're packing, you know, it's not just GLF, right? It's like 20 brands going through there. So yeah, it's fast.
That's sweet. So I got a question about not a GLF bait. We talked about it a little bit, but the Booyah Flashpoint. So they just came out with the deep one. So I played with the shallow one a little bit, and it's really good. It's really, really good. But do you fish? What are your thoughts on the deep one? Is it really good?
Better. For me, for smallmouth, the deeper. You know, it really comes, like, it's no different than, you know, when I first started fishing the Vision 110s, I seem to gravitate towards the 110+1. And I would say that it's no different with the Booyah Flashpoint in that deeper size. That's some exciting stuff coming in that Flash series. But that bait, well, I mean, I kind of was like, I don't know, man. Like, we'll see.
You're like, it's a
jerk bait. Okay, whatever. The biggest difference, and it's funny because this is like sometimes where like it's better to get lucky than be good. The whole premise for the Booyah team to go after was forward-facing sonar, because that, when they developed it, it was like, that's the craze. You need FFS on your bit package, otherwise no one's buying it, right? And so like, how do we make it return better on forward facing sonar? And they came up with this idea of having the blade on the head, and that would give a better return, which it does. I've seen it. I've looked at it. I'm like, okay, cool. For me personally, that doesn't, I could see a jerk bait before, right? Didn't really do it for me. But what I noticed immediately was the flash. And I'm like, holy smokes, like that's really cool. No other jerkbait does that, because that blade has that shine when the sun hits it and going back side to side. It's not like a constant thing. Like as soon as it stops, it's not shining, but it only does like a flicker when you hit it, right? So you hit it. Like I use a spinning rod, so that's why I'm doing the downward motion when I use jerkbait on a spinning rod, because I think it's better. And people will debate me all day on that, but you hit it and it jerks and it flashes. And the fish, I think they look over and like, what was that flash? And then they see the jerk bait that's not flashing or whatever, and they come over and they like, I think it just calls fish in from further away than a traditional jerk bait. Do I think the action is necessarily better? No, it's like the same, in my opinion, as like a Vision 110 or like +1 or, you know, a re-range, or like there's other jerk baits on the market, but that distinct different flash from the blade, in my opinion, calls fish in and triggers fish that wouldn't maybe necessarily bite, you know, a regular jerkbait. So I am now convinced. I was very skeptical at first, and now I'm a believer.
I fished it probably 2 or 3 times in the fall last year. It was never like a jerkbait bite. I got it a little bit late, but I caught some fish on it. It's a good jerkbait. What I really like is it comes like ready to go.
Yeah.
Good components out of the box. It casts a long distance, like even in the wind, you can throw it a long way.
Yep.
Like, for me, that's a big thing. When I'm fishing a jerkbait, I hate to throw a potato chip out there. Like,
yeah,
I want something I can cast. So I was pretty impressed. I haven't like really put it to work, the shallow one, but it seemed good on first impressions.
I think not that I know your areas, but I just kind of have a sense of like how you fish, where you fish. I think the deep one makes a lot more sense. Yeah. I feel more confident with the deep one in general. I don't know what it is, but I just like it. And sometimes I'll even throw the deep in shallower water, like 5 feet or 6 feet, and it actually smokes the bottom. And no one does that. And I think it triggers a lot of bites. But anyway, it's a really good jerk bait. The price point's really good. I mean, from a personal gain level, I gain nothing from a Booyah jerkbait doing well, and I'll shoot straight with people, and it is a good jerkbait. I think it does there's other baits that, you know, Pradco makes that I'm not all that impressed with. This Booyah Flashpoint is a good one.
Yeah. I was just curious. I'd thrown it a couple times. I liked it. So
it's a good jerk.
Talking about hitting the bottom with a jerkbait. So a couple of years ago on St. Clair, which like a lot of times where I'm fishing, I'm not fishing crazy deep, but I'm normally fishing in like 13 to 15 foot of water. Like my main zone I'm fishing is like 12 to 15 foot of water most of the time. But like on St. Clair a couple of years ago, I was taking a jerkbait, and the deal was you had to get that jerkbait, and it had to be hitting the bottom of the lake. Like it had to be going to the bottom, and you'd throw it around some changes in the bottom, and if it wasn't touching the bottom, hitting the bottom, like you just weren't getting that.
Yeah, I feel like there's probably some, if any, like really hardcore, like high-end tournament guys are listening to this, they're probably kind of mad at some of the things you're talking about. I feel like some of these things like probably shouldn't be talking about.
Maybe not, but
that's a really good way, and it's a good jerkbait. Yeah. Jerkbaits are awesome for smallmouth. Very good bait. Yeah.
Cool,
yeah. No, I think we got more stuff coming out, and I've been working on a bait here that's got really cool technology in it, and I'm hoping that we're able to release that next Bassmaster if all goes well this summer. I'm like really pumped about it.
Do you have baits you fished since like last year that are coming out at ICAST? Like you've already had baits for a year and a half.
Oh yeah. I've got filming done, content done, all from last summer that's coming out at ICAST. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. The Dropkick Shad and the Ned Bug had to come first because they were in development longer, and I just felt like they were like perfect, and it's time for them to be revealed. It's funny, like, you know, everyone's chasing the jig and minnow. It seems like every company is just chasing jig and minnow, and here I am releasing a Ned.
A small
Like, oh, we're
Swimbait.
making Ned. We had a little swim bait, yeah. Like they zig, we zag. I don't know. It's funny.
That's funny.
Like, what's he doing over there playing around with Neds while we're all chasing the next Sakamata?
That's funny. You already dropped the minnow last year. Like lots of minnows.
Yeah, I'm good on minnows. Yeah, 2 minnows is enough for me. I'm content.
Yeah.
I'm content with 2 minnows. We've got 3 now. We got the swim bait.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, like, no, I'm feeling really good. Like, in terms of like filling the gaps that I have known are truly a problem that weren't being filled, I feel like we're in good shape now as a brand.
How many sneaky things? Like, how many? I know there's got to be more up your sleeve, like sneaky things that just haven't come out. Is there ever a time where Dan says, "Okay, like, I know the flat cat was one of those things where maybe you didn't want to originally come out with it, but like sneaky deals that you're gonna let out of the bag in the next couple of years." Like, is there anything that, or is it now innovating on things where you see potential gaps in the market?
Both. Like, I'll continue to bring out sneaky stuff. And there's some sneaky stuff that I won't, because I just think they're too dumb and no one will buy it. So like, that's embarrassing. We won't do that. And I mean,
It's like the skirtless tube.
Yeah, like no one would buy that, right? So that's a prime example. And I mean, it's funny because I won a major tournament, like one of the biggest ones ever on that. And my tournament partner, when I figured it out, it was actually kind of like right before that tournament, maybe like 2 weeks prior, I was like, I figured out a deal, and he was like, what is it? And I showed him, and I pulled all of the skirt, like all the strands off the tube. I'm like, this is it. He's like basically like, get out of here. Like, there's no way. He was laughing so hard he couldn't stop laughing, and I'm like, you watch. And I whipped it out there, and first cast, boom, and he was like, no, there's no way that's going to outfish a regular tube. And I destroyed him with this. And this was before the Ned was a deal. Like, no one was fishing the Ned yet. And I remember the first time I saw the Ned, I was like, no, this is going to ruin our tube. Our skirt, like our strand, like our tube with no tentacles on it. It's funny because like some people would be close. Like, I would talk to guys, and like, you know, we were starting to win locally here, and they'd be like, oh man, have you tried fishing a tube with like 3 strands on it? Or like, I find like when I only have half the strands, it gets better. And I'm like thinking, oh yeah, like that's the deal. Meanwhile, I'm putting all of them off, like every single one of them. And we had that, like, I would say for like, oh man, 6 years where it just was like unbelievable. It was lights out. Like, that was the deal. And now it doesn't work. Like, they won't touch it. So that's why I'm not afraid. Yeah. It's funny. Like, sometimes we'd be fishing in a tournament, like on like an isolated, shell bar, like Zebra Flat or something, or boulders. And we'd be around guys in a tournament. And like, sometimes like we're fishing so close where like our lines would get snagged. And I would just yank on that thing so hard. Like, I'd pull that angler into the water if I had to, because there's no way I was going to let them see that. I was like, no one can know about this. Like, I'd rather like drag that guy right into the lake if I have to. And yeah, we were always fortunate that like they never fought back, and they were like, yeah, sure, man, if you need it, like, sure.
Yeah.
And, yeah, it's funny.
That's great.
Yeah, sometimes you're around guys, and you know, it gets tight quarters, and some of our lakes up here, that's just the way it is. You have no choice but to fish near guys.
Yeah, you're fishing on a spot that has fish. I mean,
yeah. So
it's, you know, the first thing where I was like, okay, these guys really know what they're doing, because you came out with some funky looking baits to start, but like when you started talking about matte finish is when I'm like, oh shoot, like these guys get it, like these guys really understand it. And now that was before I knew who you were, right? But like, for years, it was always one of my mentors growing up was like, dude, before you throw that tube out, you have to rub the shine off that thing, and it needs to be not shiny. I'm like, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make a difference. And then he smoked me.
Yep.
And I'm
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh shoot. And it's not just a tube, but then it started being a drop shot bait. Then it was a Senko. It doesn't matter for largemouth or smallmouth. Now you're starting to see it in other companies too. But like that for me was the eye opening. Like, okay, this company is not just coming out with stuff to small baits to go out and catch smallmouth. Like they're actually coming out with legit product that is well thought of, like hammer level stuff that's
Mhm.
going to help you catch fish. And Sean
Yeah.
mentioned it, but like the neutral buoyancy, like that wasn't
No
really
one
a
talked about
term.
that. No, everyone was like, our drop shot floats. Like that
Yeah,
was
it
like the
floats.
selling
It
feature.
floats.
Like it floats, and I'm like, why would you want it to float? That's so dumb. And people are bragging about it being floating, and now it's like our stuff's neutrally. We see it, like and that's fine. I mean, look, I feel like we're coming up with good stuff. It doesn't totally shock me that people are getting it, they're seeing it. I mean, we're just going to continue to kind of like be innovative, make stuff again for ourselves. And that's really the nice thing about what this was like, we're making stuff for ourselves. And you know, I don't know if we would have necessarily been able to develop this level of stuff if we didn't live where we live. So like, we're kind of a product of our environment. Locally here, the Johnson brothers live like 20 minutes from my house. Cooper Gallant lives 30 minutes from my house. Evan Kung lives 40 minutes from my house. And I've been competing against those guys my entire life. Like all these trophies and stuff, like medals and stuff, like I've had to beat those guys, or I've had to compete, and my seconds are to Corey and Chris or Cooper. Like I got many seconds here that are behind an ounce or a pound behind Cooper or the Johnsons or Evan Kung, and those guys are all in the Elite Series. And there's probably another 10 guys that fish here against us in tournaments that could easily be in that top 40 at the end of the year in a classic spot. Like it's just the quality of anglers around here is unbelievable. And we've been forced to get creative, and that's why we dove into this micro. Like a lot of those trophies and medals or whatever are because we figured out the light line micro baits, and they weren't doing that necessarily yet. And we were able to refine it, and that was our edge, and that was our
Yeah.
secret. And it was like elite level secret. Like I don't win elite level money, but the type of anglers that still come home and still fish against us, like I'm going to fish against those guys this summer. That's who I got to beat, and that's what we're creating is lures that we feel gives us a chance to beat those guys at smallmouth. And they're incredible smallmouth anglers. People consider them the best in the world. So
That's
product of the
incredible.
environment. We're just lucky. If I lived anywhere else, I wouldn't have that opportunity, and I wouldn't be trying to get to that level of perfection because I wouldn't have to beat those anglers, if that makes
Well,
sense.
so you have the St. Lawrence, obviously, which is super popular, but like a lot of people don't know you have Rice Lake, which is super popular and
Hmm.
very, very pressured, right?
Yeah, it's like probably one of the most pressured bodies of water. Like we consistently break 20 pounds, but an average angler that's never been there before might not get a bite in the day. Like they have no, like you'll go there. Like we get really good anglers that like if there's a big tournament on Rice Lake, it'll attract anglers from way out, like further away, and they'll go there and they really struggle. They're like, this doesn't make any sense. We can't get bit. And they're just so pressured. And Lake Simcoe is another famous
Yeah.
fishery. And as big as that lake is, it fishes really small, and those fish are very grouped up, and everyone knows where they are. And like, um, you get these wrap boats, right? Like the Johnsons, Cooper, other guys with wrap boats. Like it doesn't take long for every spot in the lake to be known, and now you got everyone, and it's the density of population around that lake is insane. So like literally Toronto is right there, and huge, massive population. So it just gets a lot of pressure, and these baits were all like designed and tested there. And along with the St. Lawrence. Like the St. Lawrence, people think is my home lake, but it's an hour and 50 minutes from me. Simcoe's
What is
closer.
your home like? Oh,
Rice Lake is like maybe 15 minutes from me. And
okay.
the Johnsons, that's their home lake, and Cooper, and yeah, like we all compete on Rice Lake.
That's
Yeah,
cool. How
yeah.
much of this was designed? Like we talk about St. Lawrence, but how much of this was really designed for like rice or for these other fisheries that you go to?
All of it was fished for Simcoe Rice Lake, like the Kawartha Lake. Around here, they call it the Kawartha Lakes. Like, we got a lot of lakes and a lot of diversity and a lot of, it seems like there's a lot of lakes that are all really tight, but they all set up differently. Like, we're kind of, and that's why I think the Johnsons and Cooper and Evan do so well, is we have so many lakes close to us and they all fish so differently. So they just become extremely versatile anglers. Like, we've got stuff around us that looks like Okeechobee, and then we got stuff that looks like Champlain or like Hartwell, and then we've got like Rice Lake kind of reminds me of Kentucky Lake in a sense. Like, it's a bit of a river and it's got ledges, and like, so like those guys have like grown up fishing all these different styles, and all these baits were kind of like refined for these local lakes so that we could compete locally. And there's some baits in our lineup that do really well on certain lakes but don't work at all on those lakes either, right? So like,
Yeah.
Like, I would say all of the stuff works on the big lakes like Lake Ontario, Simcoe, but then some of the smaller inland lakes, like, you might eliminate half the lineup because those baits aren't going to play at all. Like, we won't even look at those baits for that lake. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yeah, just lucky. Like, honestly, like, so like, you work hard, right? But you got to get lucky, and it just happened that we were lucky to live in an area where we just have such great smallmouth anglers.
Yeah, that's cool.
Mhm.
So, sorry, I know I'm keeping up real late, but how much do you guys share secrets or like talk to other guys about it? Like, how is the networking there? Like, is there a network? I mean, obviously to an extent, but
to an extent, but it's super tight-lipped. Like, it's really competitive. The stuff that I shared tonight, I would never have shared prior to having triplets. Like, there is 0% chance. I would never even have started Great Lakes Finesse. And it's funny because, you know, I talk about how I had dreams of like going and fishing the Elite Series, and then the Elite Series became a non-dream for me as soon as I had triplets. If anyone knows me, they know that I have three-year-old boys. That, as a parent, like, that dream to go fish the opens and then try to fish it, like, that's not a realistic thing for me, especially. So anyway, but how lucky was I now that that happened, and that kind of put me in a spot where I felt comfortable to like develop baits around all the secrets I had. And now, in my opinion, I would much prefer to be doing what I do today than fishing. Not to say that that's not an ultimate dream, but like,
yeah,
I feel really good about what I'm doing, and I'm excited, and I feel like I'm happy, and I'm like as happy as I feel like I would be touring around fishing lakes, because I feel like I get more excitement now. Honestly, I get more excitement getting beat by my own baits. Like, I got a second there last year, and actually it was the owner of Taco Bros. He lives locally here, and he beat me with the Juvie Craw. And he was like, he came in
I
with a
think
mega
you
bag.
posted that all over
Yeah.
like all the socials. You're like,
Yeah. I was
Yeah.
pumped. I was more excited that I lost to the Juvie Craw, and then, you know, losing the tournament to him. Like, I was pumped for him. I was like, that's amazing.
that's so cool.
And Evan beat me in the Thousand Island Open, which is like the big Canadian side tournament, and he won on the drop minnow. And I was like pumped for him. Like, dude, that's amazing. And that's before we sponsored him. And now we title sponsor him on the Elite Series.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's really cool.
Sean.
Yeah.
Sean's so funny.
Yeah. My face was white, to answer your question. I was ready to puke when I found out. I had no idea what my life was going to be like. I thought I was going to be so poor. I was like, this is not going to be good. But it's all been like, I was scared and terrified, but yeah, everything's been awesome. The kids are awesome. They're going to be 4 in April, and like, man, they're at such a fun age, and it's so cool because they come in my office and they're like, earlier today, my one son Nash, he was like, grabs like a bag of the Dropkick shads. He's like, can I have this? I'm like, yeah. And he's just like loving it, looking at the baits, and the other guys are like, give me one. And they're all, so yeah, bags of Dropkick shads all in my house.
That's funny.
Yeah, they're playing with the Hover Minnows and whatever. Like, they're always going to my office. Can I take this bait? And it's fun. Like, and I feel like it's going to be really cool for them. Hopefully they're into fishing, and Great Lakes Finesse is something that's part of their life too.
Yeah, that is so cool.
Yeah.
So Who is your network then? You have Matt, right? Is
Uh,
that it?
no, I got, so when I was sponsored by Rapala, like I got to know some of those guys. Like I would say I'm old. Like people think I'm young, but I'm 40. So like I've been around, and some of these young guys, like Cooper's much younger. Like when I first met Cooper, he was like 12. Like I sponsored him with my last company, and he was like 12 years old, little skater kid, and just was a creek hopper. Wasn't a big bass tournament guy. It's incredible. Like he did it himself. Like he literally just started doing clubs, and then like I was winning tournaments and he was just starting, and then it happened so fast where he just like became so good and just started winning, and I was like, what just happened? Like people started winning. Um, but my network is a lot of like the older guys that have been around, like like good buddy Steve Delia. He was on the Rapid Pro staff for many years, and then Greg Klatt, who I know on Central, they kind of pioneered like Steve, in my opinion, was a guy who really pioneered the first version of these micro baits with light line. It was very rudimentary, but he kind of like got onto it, and then I was friends with him, and he had me come out, and I was more like a jerk bait, spinner bait, tube guy. It was like we like figured something out. Not even big,
Yeah.
but he was like, "Hey, I figured something out. Like, you won't believe this. I'm catching fish on 4 pound tests." And I'm like, "Okay, like sure." And then we were like, back in the day, we were throwing like little like gulp minnows that were like, those ones that like are so bad
Oh
that
yeah.
you can't even keep it out of the water for 5 minutes because they turn into like stiff rocks. Like we were throwing those on like light line and like targeting these fish and only casting like 10 feet, and then they'd come over and suck them in, and little like the original Berkeley Hellgrammites. They were like the worst looking Hellgrammite baits you could possibly see. They looked like a easy bake oven from a 3-year-old Hellgrammite. And we would throw those, and then I was like, okay, we got to start really. He was kind of happy with how that was going, and I'm like, man, we've unlocked something here. Let's take this to a whole new level. And then I kind of, he'll be the first to admit, like I just took this whole finesse light line thing to like, I just started playing with everything I could imagine that was small. I'm like, we're throwing it at these fish, and like the countless hours of trying everything that we could figure out or buy or tie, or I mean, little flies and little eggs and like anything that we could think of. We're throwing it at them if it's small, and yeah, and then we just kind of like just refined it, and we're winning on it, and coming in second, and the Johnsons or Cooper or third or whatever, and we just did really well with it, and yeah, that's where we are today.
That's so cool. So
Yeah.
was he like your mentor then? Would you consider him like your mentor?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, like I definitely, when I started fishing tournaments, like he was the guy that like kind of pointed me in the right direction in terms of decision making, and really like he'd won. I remember going to his house when we started to become closer friends. We were on the Rapala Pro staff. I was like 16, and he was probably like maybe 40 or something, and he'd invite me over, and I'd look at his wall of medals and trophies, and just be in complete awe, and I have no medals. And I remember telling him one day, I'm like, I just want to win a medal. Like, I just want to win, and I don't even care. It's just a top 10. I want a medal. And so he was like, "Hey, like I'm gonna help you get there," and like he would like help me, and we talk about strategy, and I'd go fish, and then we every time I'd fish a tournament, I swear we were on the phone for 2 hours, and I'd tell him everything we did, every move, and he said, "Well, you should have tried this, and like you should try going here next time, or next time think about doing this if that happens." And like just having that guy to like, and he still fished against me, but he was so open with me. Yeah, he just, and then one day like it just clicked, and it seems like once you win your first one, it like clicks. Like I don't know how to describe it, but like it almost unlocks what almost seems impossible to become extremely possible. And then you just want to do it more and more and more. And then, if you're hardcore enough about it, it just becomes something that you're like, now I only accept wins. Like now I'm only happy if I win or I get beat on one of our baits. Those are the only two outcomes I'll accept.
That is so cool.
Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of it's probably a little bit more in depth than last time, or even we've spoken about. But yeah, this is it's cool telling the story, right? Like because it's a story. It's not like just let's make baits to make money. Like it really hasn't. The money was just kind of like it just happened. Like it wasn't like
the byproduct of what you're trying to do, the passion. Right?
Yeah. We never focus on dollars. We're just like, let's just try to create the best possible solution and let the money take care of itself. If it happens, great. If it doesn't, well, it is what it is. So, yeah, that's fun. I'm doing what I love. Yeah.
Last question from Sean: do you use Haramiki jigs like Robert G has been using?
No, I've never tried those. I fished an ABA last year out of Clayton, New York, and it was right before the cutoff. So like there was like it was the pre-fish, not the pre-fish, but like the pre-practice period. So like the entire elite field was out there practicing, and then that tournament happened to be like near the end of that pre-practice period. And I jumped into that tournament. I was shocked when I saw Cooper ended up winning it, but there was like it was loaded with elite level, like all the elite guys were fishing it, and there was a bunch of guys with those jigs on deck, and it kind of got me thinking like I gotta really explore that. So I think there's something to that, but I haven't been able to play with those Robert G jigs that I think he exposed. I think it was down in like
Smith Lake.
Was it Smith Lake? Okay.
Yeah.
Can't remember, but yeah, no, I haven't. I personally haven't, but I know that the elite guys are throwing those because I saw them. I saw guys rigging them, and like we were just all waiting around. And those guys don't even care about hiding anything. They just rig in the morning, and because I think they know it's not about the bait; it's about the decision making. And I mean, the bait is probably like 10% of it. When you're at that level, because everyone can catch them, so they're not so worried about like keeping the bait secret.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. I really appreciate it. I kept you on for over 2 hours, so I appreciate you hopping on and chatting and getting to know a little bit more about you. It was really cool. So
yeah, man, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's always a good time.
For sure. And just kind of to reiterate, all the baits we talked about, all the stuff from Great Lakes Finesse and new products, pretty much everything is going to be linked down below for you guys. So you can click the link, and then you create an account on there. Use the code BENFISH. You'll save 15% off your order from LureNet. All that stuff should be on there. So go down there and check it out. And Dan, thank you very much, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Anytime. It's always a good time.
For sure. Have a great night.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.